I think it'd be the Greek philosopher Socrates who would first take credit for the blessed test of speech. Ask yourself if what you're going to say is kind, true, necessary and helpful, and if not, maybe it should be left unsaid. Jesus also had rules for speech, particularly that you take direct responsibility. Let your words be yes or no, because anything more is from evil. In a church, people can't just shut you up, but this medium has to reward your attention from moment to moment for the true, for the necessary, for the kind things about God's love for creation, in other words, the gospel, so that the gospel sustains a hearing. That said, one of the delights of working for Eco Congregation Scotland is the relatively low level of grumbling, as in destructive criticism. Do we get things wrong? Of course we do. Is every connection on our online meetings secure? Well, of course not. Do we meet every single deadline or specified outcome from our backers, funders, and most crucially, our contributing members? I can genuinely say that we do our best. Sometimes it's the best by the skin of our teeth. Only seldom then does someone come pounding at any sort of door, adding their self-indulgent outrage to the disappointment we already feel if things go wrong. In my 25 years in ministry, there were times when no good deed went unpunished, but thanks to you, this is no such time, and that is good for you. The lively music which introduces these reflections for Season of Creation is called Dodgy Bastards. I like the music, but even more the title, because we rely so much on those in the congregations who, out of love and deep conviction, attract just that sort of label. Tree huggers, awkward cusses, dodgy bastards, prophets. It's an honourable tradition. Quakers, Calvinists, Lutherans, Methodists, oh yes, Christians. We've learnt to wear on our sleeve as a badge of honour the grumble names we attracted as insults. Though our scripture this week is more about grumbling against those in authority who've shouldered the burdens of doing what is right before they can either convince those who stand to benefit or convince those who are in danger of the merits of really urgent action. Do we, I wonder, suffer the politics of our day at UK level because of a culture of exclusive grumbling? When do we encourage? When do we express thanks and congratulation? How do we feel about being, and thinking of the gospel there, how do we feel about being made equal before God to climate refugees, to those whose homes are being burned in wildfires, and to cities which are running out of water? Or when we're convinced that others pollute more, will we grumble when we are asked to change ourselves? If you're still with me, thanks, congratulations. When I've been talking to MSPs, I've been impressed at the level of environmental awareness in our public servants. All the more when, with the Scottish Climate Change Bill, official targets and the means of enforcing them went well beyond the miserable aims we were marching for just a few years ago. I'm looking forward to the Citizens' Assembly on Climate Change, which certainly includes the obligation to truth and necessity, and which some wise drafting insists that the Scottish Government has got to take note of. There's more, though, to reduce and repurpose in all our lives, much more, and the tasty image of the low-hanging fruit has probably had more than its fair share of airtime. Be encouraged, in the meantime, that electricity generation in Scotland is now so largely decarbonised, and please, whenever possible, can we keep on encouraging first and grumbling last? It's often said that we are led by donkeys, but the old image of carrot and stick really falls apart when you realise the difference between a donkey and a horse. Donkeys are mountain creatures. In danger if a donkey runs, it's dead. Whip a horse and they are off across the open steppe. What is necessary is that we move, and soon. That we take note of God's instruction, be it from the scientists interpreting the prophetic voice of the persecuted earth, or from our scriptures to read these blunt and brutal signs of our times, in which the glory of God is not, as in the desert, a lackluster bag of crisps, but in hearing what we need to hear. In the gospel, we can only speculate as to how the employer of the vineyard workers feels. But being grumbled against is always bad magic. The protection against is insensitivity, growing a thick skin, and that in turn becomes a barrier against kindness and truth and maybe necessity. Grumbling shoots the grumbler in the foot. Grumbling is what stranded the Israelites in the desert for 40 years until that grumbling generation had just died off. But dear, dear friends, 40 days, 40 months of messing around is more than the planet can cope with. 40 years we do not have. As for generations, everyone alive today has a part to play. No generation is past it, no generation is to be written off. Like any charity in Scotland, we have our responsibilities of regulation and conduct. And I won't say that the burdens of this movement are light, because the truth that underlies the urgency of what we have to say is pretty heavy. Talking about creation, yes, that used to be a soft option, something you could retreat to for refreshment. And I still want to encourage you in each and every opportunity to fall in love with creation. Though attention to truth means we will discover and say some things we might not want to hear. I just hope you won't feel like shooting the messenger or grumbling in a manner which drove Moses to distraction. Poor old Moses, the meat in the sandwich. Responsibility to God and the people, trying and failing to say, don't blame me for God. I've given up saying, don't blame me for the gospel, because that only works if we don't care about what we have to say. No church, no faith group, perhaps no species has a monopoly on response to what we hear from day to day about threats, which are no longer avoidable but perhaps still modifiable. Threats to life's way of life because of human choice. Plenty, but not everything, is still to play for, not that everything ever was, least of all in the Exodus narratives. The bottom line there was the end of slavery, and in the wilderness, the bottom line was survival. God's justice is the acknowledgement of need. Sending rain and sun on the righteous and unrighteous, the human calling, like the Lord of the vineyard, is to manage and regulate these blessings. Exodus is God's response both to the people crying out, but also to the destabilization of justice and abuse. I've seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers. I know intimately about their suffering. That same Creator God then acts in partnership, in delegation with their creatures, including Moses, including us. That's not just nice, but it is liberating. It means that as we respond to the climate emergency, it is faithful and truthful and necessary and kind and responsible to stick our necks out just a wee bit more. When I began this job, I was asked to promise
and to maintain the truth of the gospel, whatever trouble or persecution may arise.
To maintain the truth of the gospel, whatever trouble or persecution may arise. The response they were looking for was, relying on the strength of Christ, I do. Relying on the strength of Christ, I do. How about you?